Alright, this LeetCode question is called FizzBuzz. It says write a program that outputs the string representation of numbers from 1 to n, but for multiples of 3, it should output fizz instead of the number, and for the multiples of 5, output buzz. For numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, output FizzBuzz. Alright, so for their example, n is 15, so what we're returning is 1 through 15, except if the number is a multiple of 3 or 5, we'd output fizz or buzz, and if it's a multiple of both, we output FizzBuzz. Two things to note are, 1, we're returning this in an array, and 2, if the number isn't divisible evenly by any of those numbers, we're outputting the string representation of that number. Alright, so this method is pretty straightforward. All we're going to do is loop over every number from 1 to n. So in this example, n would be 15. So we start out with the number 1. Is the number 1 divisible by 3? No. Is it divisible by 5? No. And if it's not divisible by either 3 or 5, it's definitely not divisible by 3 and 5. So all we do is we would add the string form of this to the array. Next, we go to the number 2. Same thing. Is it divisible by 3? No. 5? No. 3 and 5? No. Next, is this divisible by 3? Yes. So for this one, we'll just add the word fizz to the array. Number 4, not divisible by 3 or 5. Number 5, is it divisible by 3? No. By 5? Yes. So we'll just add the word buzz to the array. So let's skip ahead past the next few numbers and go all the way to the number 15. Is it divisible by 3? Yes. But is it divisible by 5? Yes also. So in this case, instead of checking whether or not it's divisible by 3 or divisible by 5, what we'll do is we'll first check to see if it's divisible by 3 and 5. What do we know about a number that's divisible by 3 and 5? That it's divisible by 15. So the order we're going to check is whether it's divisible by 15. If it's not, we'll check if it's divisible by 5. If it's not, we'll check if it's divisible by 3. And if not, we'll just output the number to a string. Alright, so let's code out method 1. We know for sure that our result is going to be in an array. Let's just put that here. So we'll say let result equal an empty array. Next, we have to loop over every number from 1 to n. So for let I equal 1, I is less than or equal to n, and then I++, so a standard for loop. Now we'll check our 3 conditions. If n is a multiple of either 3, 5, or 15. So remember, we start with 15. So if I is a multiple of 15, what do? We add FizzBuzz to the array. So result dot push FizzBuzz. So that actually doesn't correspond to where we are in the array right now. That would be if we're on the number 15. All right, let's pretend we're on the number 3 now. So that would be an else if I is a multiple of 3, which 3 would be. We would add fizz to our array. Now let's jump over to the number 5. That'll be another else if, but let's put it on top of here to put them in order. So else if I is evenly divisible by 5, we would add buzz to the array. Okay, let's move this up. All right, but we're not done. So if our number doesn't meet any of this criteria, remember what we have to do is we have to add its string form to the array. So that would be an else. What would we push? We would push I dot to string. So we're making it a string. All right, so now that we've looped over every number from 1 to n, all we have to do is return our results. And let's see how we did. Looks good. Let's submit it. Okay, our result is faster than about 7% of other JavaScript submissions. But let me just propose one scenario to you. Let's say we also want to add the number 7. So we want to say that if I is a multiple of 7, then we would push Jazz to the array. I'll show you how to do that easily in our next method. All right, so that first method was all well and good if our scenarios were only 3, 5, and 15, because we only have to check those scenarios. If we have 3, that's Fizz. If we have 5, that's Buzz. And if we have 15, we have FizzBuzz. But what if in the future we have to add another scenario? Let's say for the number 7, we want Jazz. That would mean if we have the combination 3, 5, and 7, which is 150, that would be Fizz, Buzz, Jazz. So far that's 5 checks we have to do. But what if we want Buzz Jazz? That would be 7 and 3, which is 21, would give us Buzz Jazz. All right, that's 6 scenarios we have to check. As we can see, this is getting way too complicated. A better way to do this is to incrementally build the string we want. So first, we start out with an empty string. Then we have separate if statements. And if the number meets that criteria, we add the corresponding word to that string. I'll show you what I mean. So let's say, again, we want Fizz, Buzz, Jazz. So we'll check if the number is a multiple of 3. If it is, we add that to the string. Fizz. And if the number is divisible by 5, we'll add that to the string. Buzz. And if the number is divisible by, let's say, 7, that would be Jazz. So you just add that also to the string. So as we can see, if we break it out into just if statements, we can build on the string and it'll leave us with only 3 checks as opposed to what I just showed, which was like 6 checks and I wasn't even done. So just note that in the solution, I'm not actually going to check for I being evenly divisible by 7 and that being Jazz, but I'm just going to write the solution in a way that if in the future we do have to add extra scenarios, it'll be very easy. It'll just be another if statement for each scenario. All right, so the second method starts out similarly to the first one. We need an output array. So let result equal an empty array. That'll look like this. Same as before, we need to loop over every number from 1 to n. So let I equal 1, I is less than or equal to n, and I++. The difference with this method is that we're going to construct the final string by seeing if the number fits certain criteria. So we'll initially make string equal an empty string. So that'll be let str equal an empty string. Now we'll check if the number is evenly divisible by 3 and 5. So let's pretend we're on the number 15. We'll say if I is evenly divisible by 3, then what we'll add to the final string is fizz. So is 15 evenly divisible by 3? Yes. So right now, the string is fizz. Then we'll also check if it's evenly divisible by 5. If so, what we'll add to the string is buzz. Is 15 evenly divisible by 5? Yes, it is. So the string becomes FizzBuzz. Now we have to capture the scenario where the number isn't evenly divisible by 3 or 5. So in that case, we'll see if string.length equals 0, meaning if the string over here is still an empty string, which it's not in this case, but it could be, let's say for the number 1, what we have to do is we have to attach I to that string. In JavaScript, when you add a number, let's say the number 1, to a string, that number will become the string of that number. Now that we've constructed our string or converted our number to a string, we just push that string into our array. So when you push it, this would go in the array. Looks something like that. All right, so now that we've looped over all of our numbers, the only thing left to do is to return our result array, which will be populated with all the numbers that are evenly divisible by our criteria. So remember that the reason that this method is better than the first method is, what if we wanted to add another criteria? Let's say we wanted FizzBuzz Jazz. All we'd have to do, since we're constructing the string one criteria by one criteria, is do something like this. So if we want any number that's a multiple of 7 to also be added to it, and add it to it as jazz, that's all we'd have to do. It's just one more scenario. If we wanted the number, I don't know, 11, if I is a multiple of 11, we would add that scenario, and so on and so on. Let me just get rid of that code. That was just for illustration purposes only, to show you how easy it is. Okay, so let's run the code. Looks good. Let's submit it. All right, so this method was faster than about 33% of other JavaScript submissions. But now let's think of the scenario where we need to constantly update our criteria. So instead of just adding 7 like we just did, let's say we want to remove 3, add 12, remove 5, add 9, add 6. We'll show you how to do that easily in the last method. All right, so the third method is going to be very similar to the second method with one small change. All right, so let's say instead of, I don't know, 3, 5, 7, we want 2, 5, 9. Then we'd have to change this code. And these if statements will have to completely change. So it would be if divisible by 4 something, and then if divisible by, I don't know what I just said, so let's just say 5 still, it's something, and then if the last one, 9 something, right? But now let's say the next day I want to change it to 11 and I want to get rid of the first one. So now I have to change the code again. So now I have to get rid of that one and I have to add another one. Notice how annoying it is to have to keep changing the code itself. I have to add if statements, I have to remove if statements, It's just not an efficient way to do it. So what we can do instead is we can just add the numbers we want and their values to a map. So let's say 3 is going to be Fizz, 5 is going to be Buzz, and I don't know, 7 again is going to be Jess. So now this time, when we get to a number, we just check if it's in the map. If it's evenly divisible by any of the keys in the map, we'll do what we did before and just build a string. So let's say we're on the number 3. We'll say, is it a multiple of the first one in the map? Yes, it is. So string will just become Fizz. If we do the same thing for the number 15, we'll say, is it divisible evenly by 3? Yes. So we have Fizz. Is it evenly divisible by 5? Yes. So we have FizzBuzz. So now we're not actually changing the code itself that does any checks. All we're doing is changing the map itself. We can add 11 being Bob if we want. We can add 17 being car. And if we ever want to change one of these things, we're just changing the map. But the underlying code itself, which just loops over every element in the array and checks it in the map, doesn't change. So this is very flexible. All right, we're finally at the code for our final method. So the way to do this is, as usual, we add an empty array. This will be the array we return at the end. So let's just put it here. The difference with this method is that we'll just add all of our criteria to one map. So let's say if it's 3, we want the output to be Fizz. And if it's 5, we want the output to be Buzz. So now we'll just loop over every number from 1 to n like before. We'll say for let I equals 1. I is less than or equal to n. I plus plus. And like before, for each number, we're going to have a string variable that will start out as an empty string. So let string equal an empty string. And let me add the map down here. All right, so remember how in the last method, for every number we're on, we would check the different if statements to see if it met that criteria. In this case, we're doing something very similar, except instead of if statements, we're looping over the keys in the map. I'll show you what I mean. So we'll put for let key in mappings, which is the map we just created. So if you look over here, the first key is the number 3. But in JavaScript, every key in a map is a string. So you can't just see if our number is evenly divisible by the key, because the key isn't actually the number 3, it's the string 3. So what we have to do is we have to convert that string 3 to an actual number 3. So you'll do it like this. If I is evenly divisible by, and what I'm doing now is just the way to convert a string to a number. Parse int key 10, all that does is it takes a string like the string 3 and converts it to a number. So what this is saying is if I is evenly divisible by 3, then what do? We would add the value of that key to our string. So mappings key. So let's say we're on the number 15 and we're seeing if it's evenly divisible by the number 3 in our map. If it is, now what we're going to do is add the value of it to our string. The value is Fizz. So right now, instead of our string being an empty string, it would be Fizz. And if the number we're checking is 15, When it checks against the number 3 in the map, yes, it's going to be fizz, but then it's also going to check against the number 5 in the map, and it's going to see that it is also a multiple of that. So then it's going to also add buzz to it. So just like before, at the end of that, we're just going to capture the scenario where our number wasn't evenly divisible by any of our criteria. So we'll say if string.length equals 0, we'll just need to convert our number to a string. And once we're done all of those if statements, now we'll just add whatever string we just created to our array. So result.push our string. Then at the very end, what are we going to do? We're going to return our result. All right, so you might be asking why this method is any better than our previous method. Well, think about if we want to add the number 7. All we'll have to do is add it here. Jazz. Let's say we want to add the number 11. We just add it here, like Bob. We're never changing the code below. If we want to delete something, we just delete it there. That's it, it's gone. Okay, I hope you understand now. So let me put it back to how it was. Let me run the code. Looks good. Submit it. All right, so this solution is faster than about 58% of other JavaScript submissions. As usual, the code and written explanation are linked down below. If you liked the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.